Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings be upon all of you, and welcome this evening to this month's AMP educational webinar, our 12th educational webinar thus far. This series of monthly webinars seeks to give our community access to enriching discussions on the cutting edge of the work for Palestine in America. We've hosted academics, human rights experts, members of Congress, community organizers, and leaders from around the world over the past year to shed light on the issues that we are all talking about but need to unpack further. To continue getting updates on AMP's educational programs and initiatives, please give us a follow on Facebook and Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube page to watch all of our live webinars and events. And of course, there is nothing better and more educational and more uplifting than our annual convention set to take place in Chicago, Illinois this Thanksgiving weekend. PalestineConvention.org. Please visit the site, register your friends and family members, and come out and let us see you and all your family there in Chicago to enjoy one of the largest gatherings for Palestine in the U.S. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to talk about two companies that we are all very familiar with, companies that have really permeated many aspects of our lives, Amazon and Google. But before that, I want to talk about Palestine. This summer, Palestinians across all of historic Palestine stood up in revolt against Israel's ethnic cleansing of Jerusalem and horrific aggression against the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This historic moment of collective resistance was unprecedented, but turned into a devastating Israeli assault on Gaza. The 11-day Israeli bombardment of Gaza led to the mass murder of 260 Palestinians, including 66 children, and according to Human Rights Watch, left 52,400 housing units completely destroyed or damaged. As Israel was actively engaged in the violation of Palestinian human rights and the wanton destruction of Palestinian lives, Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud both announced that they had signed a $1.2 billion contract with the Israeli government and military to provide cloud services. This deal, known as Project Nimbus, is, according to The Nation, quote, a flagship project to provide a cloud services ecosystem for the Israeli public sector, for which the Israeli Defense Forces will be the primary beneficiary, end quote. This will certainly further enhance Israel's technological advantage and control over Palestinian lives, and makes both of these companies complicit in Israel's settlement enterprise and military operations. However, this contract has not gone without opposition. Tech workers have been actively speaking out against the tech industry's complicity with Israel's apartheid regime and policies of ethnic cleansing. At the height of the brutal assault on Gaza, Amazon employees sent an internal letter signed by 500 workers to Jeff Bezos and Andy Jassy, calling on the company to acknowledge the plight of the Palestinian people. On May 18th, 2021, Jewish employees at Google penned a letter to CEO Sundar Pichai calling for the company to, quote, reject any definition of anti-Semitism that holds that criticism of Israel or Zionism is anti-Semitic. 2 days later, a similar internal letter sent by Apple employees reached the desk of Tim Cook. Then, Google and Amazon employees joined forces in a historic cross-company collaborative revolt, which as of today has gained the support of more than 1,000 Google and Amazon employees and the launch of a global campaign dubbed #NoTech4Apartheid. Joining me to talk about this historic effort are 4 employees from Google and Amazon. Gabriel and Ariel from Google, and Batul, and an anonymous Palestinian Amazon employee from Amazon. Thank you so much for joining me tonight to talk about this historic initiative to fight back against corporate complicity in endless militarism, in endless suffering from two companies that people don't typically see as culprits in evil, is particularly Google. I know Amazon has had a bad rep over the past several years with the way it's been treating its workers, but this is a historic moment for us. We're looking at something of a collaborative effort between tech workers across the globe, rejecting a project that we know is designed to further enhance Israel's advantage and oppress Palestinians. I wanted to welcome you all today and give you the opportunity to just tell us a little bit about yourself. Gabriel, we'll start with you. What made you get into tech in the first place, and what made you care about Palestinian rights in particular?
Yeah, thanks so much for the introduction, Tyre. I joined Google about 5 years ago. I came from more of an academic background where I was doing research in natural language. I was particularly interested in applications of technology for accessibility, which is just making technology easier to use for people regardless, meeting people where they're at, making technology easier to use for everyone. As for my involvement or my interest in like why I care about Palestinian rights, I did grow up Jewish, so the kind of engagement with the question of Israel has kind of been in my family and in my life for a long time. I grew up in a relatively liberal, secular Jewish environment, and often actually felt distanced and separated from Jewish communities because of my perspective on Israel and my belief in like, justice for Palestinians. This has kind of been reinforced like a number of times over the course of my life. But I wouldn't necessarily even say that I care about Palestinian rights because of my identity or because of my experience. I care about Palestinian rights because Palestinian rights are human rights, and I think that we have to care about human rights for everyone, regardless. And that's one of why I see all of these intersections between justice movements in America and justice for Palestinians. Yeah, I'll stop there. Let other people respond. But happy to go deeper.
And Ariel, you're also a jugler, as they call. Tell us a little bit about that, and what also brought you to Palestinian rights work. You've been involved in a plethora of social justice issues with your company, including climate. Tell us a little bit about that and your work in the company.
Yeah, well, hi everyone. Thank you, Tahir, so much for having us. Similar to Gabriel, I joined the company around 6 years ago. I'm also an interpreter and originally went to work at Google Translate. So obviously, that was something that was extremely interesting for me. I think like the idea of being a part of being able to build out language democracy as that applies to technology was really exciting, and part of the reason I was interested in joining Google. And obviously, the fact that that was one of the things that brought me into Google at the beginning is a huge piece of what motivates me now to organize, because I share the conviction that so many of us workers have that, we have to take responsibility for our technology, and we have the right to take accountability for the impact that our technology is having on the communities we serve. So that's definitely one of the things that really motivates me. And I would echo a lot of what Gabriel said. You mentioned the Juglers. The Juglers is the name for Jewish Google employees. Obviously, as a Jewish person, I feel like a deep sense of responsibility and a moral duty to be an ally to the Palestinian rights movement. But also, like Gabriel said, Palestinian rights are human rights and matter, and absolutely must matter and should matter to all humans and to all of us. So I think this issue and this movement and this coalescence of workers is something that I hope can resonate with so many people across the board and across tech companies.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And Batul, you're a Muslim Amazonian. Tell us about how you got into tech and what got you into the work for Palestinian rights.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Tahir. Thank you, AMP, for having us. So I've been at Amazon for 2.5 years, and I actually work at Amazon Studios. So I'm not technically a quote unquote tech worker, but I think that's another thing that we could talk about a little bit more about, how this is something that all workers can and should care about, regardless of that aspect. But I really just got involved because, as Gabriel and Ariel have already said, I mean, this is really a simple issue when we think about it, right? It's at its very core just an issue of people wanting to live with the kind of basic freedoms, dignity, have dignity, and be allowed to live the way that, a lot of us are able to. So it's something that I think that, of course, being Muslim, there's a tie, right, to the land and to the area there. But I think more than that, it's just kind of the basic values that we hope that everyone can be able to live under, and in this very small way that we can contribute. That's why I got involved.
Thank you for that. And we also have with us a Palestinian Amazon employee who asked to remain anonymous, and shared with me that they have family members in Gaza who were impacted by the recent Israeli assault there, and have had to take action collectively with fellow colleagues against this project, which will create more suffering for Palestinians in Gaza. I want to ask you guys, tell us more about Project Nimbus, or as much as you can based on what's available out there, and how might it harm Palestinians specifically? And this question is for anyone who can answer.
Yeah, so we actually, one of the issues that we've been talking about a lot is that we don't actually know that much about Project Nimbus. We know that it is a contract to build data centers and provide cloud services to the Israeli government, including the Israeli military. We know that from reporting that the contract supposedly has 2 clauses that we find particularly problematic. One clause denies Google and Amazon the right to withhold services from any branch of the Israeli government, which, in our opinion, cedes Google and Amazon's control over their technology. So were something to happen, or were it to be discovered the technology were being used in direct service of human rights violations, we would have no recourse. The other provision of the contract we find particularly troubling is a provision that purports to be some kind of no exit clause that was specifically designed to head off this type of employee activism that we're engaging in now. I think that since past efforts by Google employees in particular that have spoken out against contracts with militaries around the world, Google and Amazon and the Israeli government knew that this contract would be controversial. And we see that this contract provision specifically as an attempt to deny workers our right to uphold our own ethics and be responsible for the product of our labor and the impact that has on the world.
Absolutely. And I read somewhere that Amazon's cloud service would assist in Israel's expanding settlement enterprise by supporting data for the Israel Land Authority. For those who don't know what the Israel Land Authority is, it's the government agency that manages and allocates state land. And as actually Human Rights Watch argued, the Israel Land Authority administers discriminatory land policies that, quote, nurture the growth and expansion of predominantly Jewish settlements while hemming Palestinians into dense population centers in starkly unequal terms. So this will directly make Amazon and Google complicit in the settlement enterprise. This is clear now. It's more evident than ever. What did Amazon and Google employees say to that when information started coming out about how Project Nimbus will actually manifest itself and how it could harm Palestinians in that way? Batul?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key thing here that Gabriel mentioned is that the companies specifically included in the contract to kind of essentially not listen to employees' concerns, right? Which kind of raises the flag that they knew that there would be concerns around this contract, and they knew that employees and others, obviously, as we've seen, the public has had loads of support for the employees that are speaking out against this contract because of those reasons, that the contract would allow for further surveillance of Palestinians, would allow for further destruction of Palestinian homes, for settlements to increase in Palestinian areas. So all of those things, you know, they knew that they would assist in all of those actions, right? And that would be a large harm. So the kind of growing concern for us is that the companies don't want to listen to workers, right? And we are really strongly urging them to not do that and to kind of understand why we're raising these concerns, especially looking at, like you noted, the Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, the UN itself. All of these organizations have called out Israel for their violation of human rights and international law. And the contract will only contribute to that continuing to happen.
And our anonymous Amazon employee said that Amazon and Google are enabling and enhancing the Israeli military's technological warfare against the Palestinian people. This brings me to my next question. Are there any standards for ethical practices that can be applied here? I mean, all companies have social responsibility clauses, and they talk about how, you know, they do no harm. Is there precedent for Google and Amazon taking ethical stances on issues of social importance? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, both companies, both Google and Amazon, have publicly stated values. And that's part of why we feel so compelled to organize right now, because of the fact that our companies, you know, state publicly that they have values to both their workforces and also to the public, to the communities and to the end users that they serve. So what we're asking right now, for us, it really feels like it's a baseline, really basic ask for our companies to just live up to these publicly stated values, which they're already supposedly committed to.
Mm-hmm. Gabriel, go ahead.
I think Batul, did you unmute to speak?
Yeah, just one thing that I wanted to add on to that. So as a result of previous actions, right, Google created their ethical AI principles, and Amazon doesn't have that. I think this is a great opportunity, and coming after other instances of workers asking Amazon to stop working with militarized groups in the past, this is another opportunity for Amazon to finally kind of make that public stance and put together that the list of ethics principles. And it's in this case, it's like a basic, it can be very basic, like not doing business with a state that has broken international law. It's not asking really for the most complex thing to be done, but to put into words and then stick to those words, right, is the most critical part, as we're seeing that Google has the principles, but may not be actually committing in actuality to those ethics.
And
Yeah.
you all, yeah, go ahead, Gabriel. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Google does have like quote AI ethics, and those are used to oversee certain business decisions, right? But those ethics that we purport to apply to AI contracts, we don't have a similar code of business ethics, right? Like we don't have that overseeing all of our contracts, regardless of the technology used. And while some may argue that AI is like, it's particularly important for AI because AI is maybe more powerful or something, actually the core technology, having large data centers, being able to store massive amounts of data, being able to run massive computations is also extremely powerful and contributes to, like you said in the beginning, Tahir, a very unequal access to cloud technology. So one of the things that we'd like to ask of Google is to apply these ethics based on the impact that it will have on the real world and on our users, to our business decisions, as well as to our AI technology. The other thing I would just add is that we have publicly stated principles about how we do business, but we also have publicly stated principles that take the form of promises to our users. And one of those promises is that we respect users' privacy. And I think that in this contract, we're breaking that privacy because this technology is potentially facilitating the surveillance of our own users. And this isn't specific to this contract, right? This is specific to contracts with certain organizations in the US government. It's specific to contracts with governments around the world as surveillance has become more and more prominent. But we can't make that promise to users while fulfilling these contracts. So we're calling on our companies to find a better way.
Absolutely. The public letter you all have started has got a lot of support. You have 1,000+ employees from both companies who have signed on. I mean, this is historic as far as I know. This cross-company collaboration is incredible. Tell me a little bit about what brought the letter together, sort of what was the impetus behind it, and how the cross-company collaboration started.
Well, as our colleague who's remaining anonymous pointed out in the chat, and I think it's important to uplift this point that was made by them, this contract was signed the same week, and I'm going to quote exactly what was placed here in the chat. The contract was signed the same week Israel brutally massacred the Palestinian people just this past May. Palestinians, like my family, have been living under illegal Israeli military occupation for decades and subjected to gross violations of human rights, which is funded by the US government and is now being serviced by massive American tech corporations like Amazon and Google. All of this organizing in many ways is kind of the culmination of our being able to get into contact with each other and to start working with each other since May, because the contract in and of itself is scary just inherently, but the fact that it was signed this exact week really, I think, adds to the pain of the contract and to the problematic nature of the contract. It was signed exactly the week of this escalating violence, and it is, seeing that happening at our companies brought us together in solidarity, in coalition with each other, and we started to talk and say, what are we going to do? And in many ways, this letter, which is historic because it brings people together from across the board and from across companies, it is the culmination of that organizing and that kind of community building that's been happening since May.
And that's what's incredible about this to me is, tech employees and workers don't typically have the same reputation that maybe dock workers do, or unionized labor does in the radical organizing space. But you've received overwhelming support from fellow employees. How does it feel that you've been able to mobilize thousands of colleagues to sign a letter, but also really instigate debate and discussion internally about company ethics? Do you see a trend here, a shift possibly in the way that workers address these issues?
I think definitely. I mean, as Ariel pointed out, this happened when there was an escalation of violence this past year, but we've seen an escalation of violence every year, if not multiple times a year for decades, right? And I think this year something really special happened in May where Palestinians who were so brave to kind of put everything out on social media brought a new lens to us in America to really be able to see what's happening on the ground with kind of an unfiltered view. And that, I think, allowed a lot of folks who were not previously engaged to become more aware about what was happening and more willing to engage in organizing like this. Especially with them being able to see kind of the harsh reality that these folks were facing on a daily basis, just trying to live their daily lives. So we have gotten loads of support. I think it's also been great in that people have really realized, and Gabriel pointed this out as well, but the interconnectedness of this issue with other issues that we've had in the past and that workers have mobilized in the past for. So this is just another instance of that, and hopefully will be another situation where we as workers can come together and call for a long-term kind of sustainable way for these companies to stop engaging in business with militarized organizations.
Yeah, I would also just add that I think we're also seeing a rise in labor-based organizing around the country right now. And I think that there's especially kind of following the lockdown phase of the pandemic, I think we're in a huge time of consciousness raising amongst workers across all industries. And I think that the tech is no exception. I think tech workers are starting to see themselves more as workers and recognize that we in fact have power. And because our companies are so powerful, we in fact have a lot of power to affect change at a potentially large scale. And I think that while many tech workers are paid well, have like relatively good benefits, etc., that's like not actually true across the tech industry at large. There are like many contractors and other labor issues. But it's also true that I think as tech workers, like we are starting to recognize more and more that we need to be responsible for the impact we're having on the world, and starting to see this as see essentially ethical business practices as a labor issue.
And it's incredible that Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud are collaborating on this contract with the Israeli government. And it's amazing to see that on a grassroots level, employees are collaborating cross-company to oppose it. Ariel, Google says that it's a company that can make money without doing evil. That's their mantra. Would you agree with that statement?
I do agree with that statement. And I think the fact that Google is saying that is part of what motivates us to stand up right now. Because really, again, to repeat, we are asking our companies to live the values that they claim already and that they state already to have and to espouse and to live by. That's really all we're asking. And it's a very basic right and responsibility that we have. And one other important thing, I know we've talked a little bit, Batul mentioned, working at Amazon Studio, like, am I a tech worker? Am I not? I'm a product marketing manager. I think the interconnected nature of technology is such that all of us as workers, whether our labor is directly going into cloud services or not, our labor could be indirectly impacting this particular contract. And so we do have a direct responsibility, and we do feel a direct connection to this work and to this contract, and really believe that all workers have a place in this movement and have a right and just a really strong positionality in terms of being able to ask our companies to cancel Project Nimbus.
And these companies are massive. Both Amazon and Google are multinational corporations, have employees around the world. Amazon has close to 900,000 workers. I think Google close to 180,000. Have you seen a lot of support also from workers around the world for this campaign? and where are those workers?
Yeah, on the Amazon side, we've seen support from everywhere, really. We were curious, and so we kind of looked into where people were supporting from. And we've seen support across the US. We've seen loads of support in the Middle East, specifically in Jordan. We've seen support in Europe. And I think it just lends itself to the fact that this is a global issue, but also this is an issue that so many people from so many different backgrounds, whether that be ethnic or national backgrounds, religious backgrounds, whatever the case may be, that there is support from every type of person that you can find. You'll find someone that's in support of Palestine, right? And that's great. That's great to see. In addition to just the internal, I'll just note, in addition to the internal support, we have also seen through the campaign that JVP and Empower put together that there's been over 20,000 external emails that have been sent to leadership, over 50 organizations that have signed on. So it's really getting larger and larger than I think any of us thought it would, which is amazing. And the support is coming from absolutely everywhere.
Gabriel, Ariel, any comments on the global impact of this campaign?
Yeah, I would echo what Batul is saying. I think we're seeing support from all over, and we hope that workers from all over can get involved. Absolutely. This is a global issue. Palestinian human rights. Palestinian rights are human rights. We should all, as humans, be concerned, and we hope that people from across the company will continue to rise up and join in our ask here.
You all have been bold and public about your opposition to Project Nimbus. Gabriel, what's that one thing you want people to know about this campaign, looking at the bigger picture?
Yeah, I mean, well, to kind of address how you started, that we've been public, it's true that, yeah, we have been very public, but I don't know, I guess maybe the one thing I would want people to know is that, the thing that kind of keeps me going on this campaign is just the sheer number of conversations that I've had with people at Google, like thanking me for doing this work, telling me that this campaign has like made them feel seen and like respected at Google for the first time, and people expressing that part of their experience working at Google is this dissonance that they feel between Google's stated values and on the one hand, and Google's business practices and a culture of Islamophobia and a culture of disregard for Palestinian rights that they find internally in the company. So I think that, I think it's really important. It feels like we're speaking up for ourselves and our own values, but also for other workers who maybe can't take the same risks that we can.
Absolutely. And I want to read a comment from our anonymous Amazon employee. I asked the question, what's the one thing we want people to know about this campaign? And they responded, this campaign is inspired by Israel's campaign of violence against Palestinians. No Tech for Apartheid stands united for all who are silenced from every corner of the world, from the river to the sea. I imagine being this public comes with the drawbacks, it comes with the backlash, it comes with the pressure. How can people support you, especially if accusations are being leveled against you? What would you ask of the community and people watching today? Ariel?
Yeah, so I'm seeing in the comments here, question from a viewer. I'm guessing you're getting accused of being anti-Semitic and suffering other attacks. Are there ways that Palestinian rights allies can help you? I mean, anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. We will say it over and over and over again. Just keep saying it. Like for those of us who are Jews in this movement, we are showing up with saying that over and over again as much as we can. It's a distraction. It's a tactic. It's on purpose. It's designed to break up the Palestinian rights movement. It's designed to distract us from what the actual goal is in general in the Palestinian rights movement, I think, but it's specifically right now when we talk about Project Nimbus, I think we need to stay focused. We're asking our companies to live their stated values, the values that they state publicly. We are asking our companies to live by those values. That's what this movement is about. We ask the same thing in other contracts. Palestine is no exception. We stand up for human rights across the board, and Palestinian human rights are no exception. So I think continuing to iterate that and to state that and to not be distracted is something really important. And for those of us who have the privilege to feel safe being public right now, we recognize the fact that so many people don't. And I think continuing to recognize that is really grounding and important. For those who do feel safe and like speaking out is something that is an option, I would just encourage folks to know that as workers, it is really important for us to take responsibility for the impact that the technology we build and for the impact that our labor has on communities on the ground, and to just continue to repeat that and let people know that we're here and we'd love to work with you and to collaborate with you.
I saw you had unmuted. Sorry,
No, you're good. I think just Ariel covered it all. I think all of those points are super important. I would just say for others that want to get involved or want to support, I mean, the main thing that we as workers can do is put pressure internally, right? But externally, I think that same pressure, if not more pressure, needs to be applied to continue to spread the message and to really show that this is something that, it's not just the four of us that are here talking that care about this, right? And the numbers show that, the data shows that. So we want to really continue spreading that message, continuing to have the conversations, continuing to explain to folks that this is not an isolated issue by the companies, that the companies have done this before, that they'll do it again, and that the only way really that we can unfortunately convince them to do otherwise is to continue to apply that pressure from sort of all angles.
Yeah, it would also just encourage everyone to, have this conversation with anyone who's involved in tech, even they're at Microsoft or Oracle or IBM. All of these companies are involved in very different ways. If you know anyone at Amazon or Google, please talk to them and tell them to find us. It's not that hard. And yeah, just have this conversation over and over again.
And Gabriel, you actually hit it, because I was going to ask that next. I'm pretty sure there are Google and Amazon employees watching right now. What can they do to join you? How can they sign on to the letter that has already 1,000+ signatures on it?
You can, Google and Amazon employees can find us on Corp. It's not hard. You can search and find us. We have an internal forum that you can find pretty easily. So I'd encourage you to sign on, and also feel free to reach out to either me or Ariel personally.
But Batul, are there other avenues for Amazon workers to sign on and support?
Yeah, so absolutely, people can find me. It'll be very easy. You can find me on the phone tool internally and reach out that way. We also have a Palestinian human rights wiki, which you can look up, and you'll be able to find more resources that way as well.
And I also want to include the comment from our anonymous Amazon employee, which when we asked the question, how can you support this movement? They responded saying, by educating yourself about the reality in Palestine, spreading awareness and sharing this campaign with every single person you know. And most of all, keep talking about Palestine. As for the Palestinians listening, don't be afraid to be Palestinian. I know it can be daunting when certain groups are targeting you, but we have to continue resisting and embracing our traditions. We have to continue keeping our culture alive and speaking up for those who are struggling to survive against Israel's war crimes and apartheid regime. I wanted to also tell folks that there is a call to action. As was mentioned, tens of thousands of people have responded to the call to action so far, sent, I think, 20,000 plus emails to both Google and Amazon. So the public can be involved in this campaign. I encourage everyone to go on notechforapartheid.com, notechforapartheid.com. We will try to put that on the screen there so you could see, and you could join the call to action. You could take action today, support the workers who are making this bold stand against companies who are seeking to profit billions from the suffering of Palestinians. I think this is going to be a big moment and campaign. It's going to be a long-term campaign. This is not going to be a quick and easy campaign to fight. Nonetheless, this is a proud moment for me as someone who comes from California, seeing the power and potency of tech workers and how boldly they've stood up against this. Honestly, just a couple years ago, I would have thought this was unimaginable, that people working in these big companies would be taking such a bold stand on Palestine. Climate issues, other issues notwithstanding, Palestine always seemed to be an issue that was very hard to touch for people in working in companies and worried about their living and what the potential repercussions could be from the companies. And seeing that thousands of people from these companies are joining this campaign and speaking openly on Palestine is truly inspirational, and honestly is a pivotal moment in the history of Palestine organizing in the US. I wanted to give you the last word. You know, if there's anything in addition that you'd like to say about proclaimed values of Google and Amazon, and what this campaign means in the large grander scheme of things, feel free to comment. It's for everyone. Batul, we could start with you.
Gabriel, look like you have something to say, so you could go first.
I was just going to say that thank you so much, Tyre. Yeah, it's great to know that this campaign is reaching people and is touching some people. Like I said before, that's kind of the most important thing for me. I mean, well, one of the things that keeps me going, I think the most important thing is affecting like material change for Palestinian lives here. But the other thing I would say is that I do think it's like historic and interesting that this is a cross-tech, cross-company collaboration. And, you know, I would encourage like workers, even from other tech companies, you could reach out to us in a variety of ways. Also through, if you look up Jewish diaspora in tech, that's kind of a public portal. You can submit a form to get in touch with us. And, you know, I think that the potential for a cross-industry collaboration of workers speaking out has the potential to be really powerful. And I am excited to see where this all goes. And just want to thank you so much for having us, Tahir, and to everyone listening for your support.
Thank you, Gabriel. Go ahead, Batul.
I'll just add one thing to that. You know, this is timely right now, right? The letter just came out a couple of weeks ago. A lot of people are engaged. We want to continue to keep that engagement up and increase that engagement. So I'd really encourage everybody that's listening, and thank you for everybody that is listening, to continue to support as external folks, but to also encourage anybody that you know that works at these companies to get more involved, and to continue so that we can continue to work on this issue, because we know that it's not going to be something that happens overnight. And we really do, as Gabriel said, the most important thing that we can do is actually make material change, right? So the only way that we're able to do that is really if we do that all together. So for anybody that wants to join, please do so. We'd love to have as much support as we can on this.
Ariel?
Yeah, everything that Gabriel and Batul said, fully agree. Like, yes, I'm just feeling really inspired by the immense amount of energy behind this, both externally and internally. I think it's absolutely incredible. I also think it's really a testament to the extent to which this is a crisis of conscience. So I really hope that our companies will heed our call here. The last thing that comes to mind is that on the Google side, like, one of the biggest values that I remember being told about the company coming in, and to this day, is bring your full self to work. This has been like a huge value. And I really hope that we can have an affirmation from our company that bringing our full selves to work, including our values, is something that will be celebrated as opposed to retaliated against. I specifically hope that Palestinian workers can be centered in this movement and in this moment, and that Palestinian workers can have an affirmation from these companies that's standing up for their own community, for their own families, and just stating that they hope that the technology they're expected to build every single day won't be doing systemic harm to their own communities and families, that will be embraced and celebrated as opposed to punished. I really hope that we'll see that from our companies.
That is beautiful and absolutely 100% on point. Again, I want to push the call to action, notechforapartheid.com. Please visit that website. Take the time to fill out. I think it takes like a minute, literally. You fill out the call to action, sends an email on your behalf to these companies, adds the pressure as the momentum keeps building for this campaign to end Project Nimbus. As was mentioned before, there is precedent for this. Other projects have been fought against and stopped. The 2019 Google terminated the Project Dragonfly, a censored search engine in China. They developed the principles for AI technology, as was mentioned. There's room for this campaign to grow, and there's room for the momentum to reach a critical mass where the companies will no longer be able to ignore the voices, the loud and powerful voices of their workers. Thank you, Batul, Gabriel, Ariel, and thank you to our courageous Amazon employee who stayed on with us and contributed to this discussion. We certainly know of the ability of these companies to retaliate and what they can do to employees who are organizing and speaking out for causes that may not serve the bottom line. And so we thank you and encourage you to continue to speak out, and we will continue to support you in whichever way we can as an organization and as a movement for justice in Palestine here in the US. Again, I want to remind my fellow viewers to join us in Chicago this Thanksgiving weekend for the Palestine Convention. On the Road to Freedom is our theme this year. Right now, there's a promo. Join one of the largest gatherings for Palestine in the United States, PalestineConvention.org. I want to thank the partner organizations that have been doing incredible work for this campaign to help and support the workers, Empower Change and Jewish Voice for Peace, and support all of you, incredible workers, as much as we can. And again, a salute of honor to all of you for taking this bold stand and setting a really impressive precedent in a moment of darkness for the Palestinian people that we witnessed this May when Gaza was being brutally attacked. Thank you all again. We are closing out the show. Have a good night, and we'll see you on our next monthly education series for our 13th education webinar next month. Look out for the announcements about the time and date. And we are excited to see you once again. Thank you very much.